The rise of monthly subscription services in the video game industry is a very fascinating development, and you've had a few services that have gained a lot of traction, but definitely the most successful one, the most notable one that we will be focusing on a lot today is Xbox Game Pass, which is, of course, Microsoft's gaming subscription service that gives you access to hundreds of games for a low fee of $9.99 a month. While there aren't exact numbers of how many subscribers Xbox Game Pass has, it seems to have been a very successful endeavor for Microsoft so far. And some analysts speculate that the subscription model is eventually going to replace full game purchases and will become the new industry standard within the next 5 to 10 years. And I have to say, that seems very unlikely. I do not think the subscription model is sustainable in the long term, and I have 3 main reasons why I believe that is the case, and why full game purchases will remain the industry standard for years to come, and subscription services will maintain prevalence. They're not going to go away or anything like that. They will continue to see significant growth over the years, but by no means will they come close to replacing the model that we have right now, where you pay for a game full price, $60 or however much it costs, and you have the game. While subscription services are a great option and it exposes people to so many new games, by no means could it realistically replace the current system. And the first reason why I believe this to be true is oversaturation. We're already starting to see this in the TV/movie industry. Remember 10 years ago? TV consumers saw Netflix as a much cheaper alternative to cable services that charge $40, $50, sometimes up to $100 a month for a cable package, when the consumer wasn't really interested in most of the channels that were part of the cable package and maybe only watched a handful of shows on select few channels. Sound familiar? You ever have your parents complain that there's nothing on TV, I'm paying this expensive cable bill, but there is nothing to watch? I think very similar to Netflix, Game Pass and these other gaming subscription services are able to say, hey, you pay this monthly fee, right? And you are able to play a wide library of games. You can try all these different games that you probably would have never played before because buying them individually costs so much. And in that case, you have more accessibility to more games at a very reasonable cost. But that's one thing, cost. We're going to talk about that very soon. But the general oversaturation of these streaming services and subscription services, whatever. I mean, one day they're all going to be one and the same. I mean, these subscription services like Game Pass, you don't necessarily stream your games, you just download them. But it's kind of like PlayStation Now, how you stream the games and then there's an option for you to download them as well. I think it's going to be the same thing, like kind of like Netflix, how you can download so you can watch offline, but it's still a streaming service through and through. So xCloud and Game Pass, they're going to merge together. Whatever, streaming, subscription, all that stuff combined together very soon, and we're already starting to see it. That market is going to be heavily oversaturated, and this is right now where you still have most people who buy all their games like individual. They buy most of their games at $60 a pop or whatever, however much it costs, but they buy games the old-fashioned way. Even with that, you already have such a huge oversaturation, because at least back when Netflix was out, they pretty much dominated the whole field for a long time, and it was considered a viable alternative to the cable industry. But even in gaming, with all these services being in their infancy, this being a new subset of the video game industry, the market is already getting oversaturated. Okay, so we have Xbox Game Pass, PlayStation Now, Google Stadia, which has its Stadia Pro subscription service, Humble Bundle Monthly, EA, how can I forget? EA/Origin Access, which I am subscribed to myself. And eventually you're going to see a situation where all of these streaming services, or rather all of these publishers, are going to make their own streaming services to compete. Because it's like, well, why can't we take all of our games that are on these streaming services and just make our own streaming service? If they're so popular, it cuts the overhead. We don't have to pay Microsoft or whoever any money, or we don't have to share our profits, rather, with Microsoft. We can create our own service. So Activision's going to create their own service. Ubisoft's going to create their own service. All these publishers, Take-Two, they're all going to do it if this thing really takes off. And you're going to see exactly what you see right now with the TV and movie streaming market. Too much competition. I know that seems like a thing that doesn't really make sense. Competition's always a great thing. But in this case, where content is exclusively locked to each platform, it becomes very problematic if you actually want to be able to access all these different games that you want to play. Like, let's say you want to play 3 different games, but they're all on 3 different services, and you don't necessarily care about the other games. All these services really start to become such a nuisance. And there's 2 components of that, of the oversaturation, that help prove my point about the long-term sustainability of the streaming model, of the subscription model, is that you will have to pay for multiple different streaming services to the point that it doesn't really become much cheaper than just buying the games outright. That was the main thing that was attractive for Netflix in the first place, that got people into that service, was because it was so cheap and you had access to so much content. Now, don't get me wrong, Netflix still has the content. They still have an amazing video-on-demand library, and they are still by far the greatest streaming service that we have right now to stream movies and TV shows. But if you want to have all the content, and there is a lot of content offered by different streaming services, you're going to have to spend a lot of money. So, for example, with what we have right now, we have Netflix, you have Amazon Prime, you have Disney Plus, Hulu, and so on and so forth. There's so many different streaming services. I mean, like, I can go on and on and on and on and on about that. Point is, if you want to have access to all of that content, it's going to cost a lot. One streaming service alone will cost you about $120 a month. So with Origin Access, for example, if you want to have access to the newest games, you're going to have to put out $120 a year. They have the cheaper option where you can have the vault and pay $30. So there is some flexibility and versatility involved in how you customize your experience. But ultimately, if you want to play the newest games when they come out, and you like games that come from, let's say, 4 different companies, you will be paying about $480 a year. Because in order for this to ever be sustainable, for that to even be under consideration, yeah, you're not going to have $1 Game Pass offers anymore. That's just not going to happen anymore. Eventually, they're going to get rid of that, and it's going to be standard $9.99 a month. But who knows? Eventually, maybe they'll raise the prices even further than $9.99. Maybe like what Netflix did. Yeah, $9.99 we can't do it. We're going to have to raise it to $10.99, then $11.99. Right now, Netflix sits at $12.99. So eventually, I mean, the prices are only going to get higher. I mean, I know I otherwise wouldn't spend $400 a year on video games, period. Never mind all these different subscription services, because that's a lot of money. $480 a year for 4 services? That would be like more than the cost of a brand new game console. Think about that. Which brings me to my final point about the long-term sustainability of these subscription services, okay? This is something I've brought up a lot of times before in previous videos, so I don't mean to rehash things that I've said before, but it's very important in understanding that what may have worked in other entertainment industries may not necessarily translate that well into video games. So when it comes to streaming and all of that, I've mentioned the streaming technology being very challenging in translating into video games because it's such a demanding task on your bandwidth, and not a lot of people really have the bandwidth that you need. I mean, Stadia just came out, and barely anybody can run that shit. So, you know, is that signs of things to come in terms of the actual quality of the service? Well, PlayStation Now is decent. You have some pretty decent streaming services, so I'm not even going to mention that whole aspect of it. But the freedom, okay, which is my third point. Freedom. So the first one was oversaturation. The second one was cost. The lack of freedom that these streaming services / subscription services give you as a gamer, the little options that you have, really make it a difficult prospect for being the primary way in which gamers consume their video games. The thing about gamers is that they tend to have a lot more value in freedom than consumers of other media. Now, why is that? Well, it's because video games are such a personalized experience in and of themselves that compared to other media like music and movies and TV shows, the ownership aspect is very important. Being able to say that you own that product, instead of having it locked behind a subscription paywall, and let's say if you do not pay for that subscription anymore, you lose access to that game when you've put hundreds of hours into personalizing your experience. Like, you have a personal investment in the game world, more so than you would with a TV show or a movie, because that aspect of the interaction that you are able to control that character in the video game and actually take part in the world building. What I'm trying to get at here is that people who play video games value freedom and choice a lot more than people who consume other mediums. And the thing about the video game industry is that we don't really need these streaming services. I mean, yeah, sure, they're a great option and they're always going to be around, and I'm sure some people are going to be using them, and myself included. I'm subscribed to Origin Access, but I can't imagine this becoming the standard in the video game industry. Like, that's the standard way that people access their games, is purchasing all of these different streaming services. Because don't fool yourself. If streaming services become more and more popular, we're going to see a repeat of Netflix and Disney Plus and all these different services popping up in the TV streaming world. We're going to see Activision, every single publisher, making their own streaming service. So if you want to play games from specific publishers, you have to get all the streaming services from all the different publishers. And I just can't imagine that being sustainable. You know, with Netflix, streaming really took off because it was a great alternative to these cable services that were just, they took away your freedom to begin with, and Netflix gave you more freedom. And I think that's a big reason why Netflix became so popular in the first place, because it offered you more freedom. You could decide what you wanted to watch. But with these game streaming services, I feel like a lot of that is being taken away. A lot of the freedom is being taken away, and you're left with less choices, not more. Now, is this to say that Xbox Game Pass is going to be a complete failure? No, but the rapid success that they're having right now, it's eventually going to slow down. I mean, a big component of their growth are these $1 Game Pass subscriptions, which, you know, they're not going to do forever, but they're just trying to get people exposed to their service, and then they pay the full $9.99 a month. But as soon as all these other developers and publishers decide, hey, we're going to make our own streaming services, the game library for Game Pass is going to go down dramatically, and Microsoft's going to have to step up with original content like Netflix is doing right now. But I don't think they're really prepared for that. They bought all these studios, and I feel like a big part of that is to get Game Pass going, right? It's to have all these games, they're on Game Pass day one, but are they really going to be making more money than Sony in the long run when Sony has the $60 releases and they sell millions of copies of each of those games? Like, it's a reliable, steady income. But with Game Pass, you have the $10 a month, and then you have to share the profits, obviously, with different developers and publishers who decide to put their games, third parties who decide to put their games on Game Pass. But the third parties are going to go eventually when they realize, hey, we can do our own streaming service, you know? So those are the three main reasons why I think that Game Pass and other similar monthly subscription services for gaming are not sustainable in the long term. And it might take a while before anything that I say actually starts to come true. It might take 5 years. It might take even 10 years. Because Netflix 10 years ago was just starting to take off. And now we're starting to see some problems. And there are going to be a lot of similarities, some differences between game streaming and the other streaming services and their successes and failures. But the main three reasons I can come down to as to why Game Pass is not sustainable in the long term is the oversaturation that's inevitably going to come, followed by the high cost associated with it, keeping up with all these monthly subscription services due to the oversaturation of the streaming market that is going to eventually come once they have that streaming infrastructure, all these different publishers, you know, they get on board with that. It's coming. And I also don't think that these streaming services really do enough to entice people to replace the current system of buying games outright in favor of these streaming services / subscription services. I just don't think they really do enough to entice people to get on board. You know, maybe you're subscribed to Game Pass. Maybe you're subscribed to another service, but are you going to really be subscribed to more than 2 subscription services in the long term? And do you really have more freedom in the long run when what happens if that streaming service closes down? All of your progress is gone? Like, that's a big concern, especially video games. You put so much more time and effort into that than watching a movie for 2 hours. And movies are so much easier to preserve, you know what I'm saying, than a video game. I mean, we have video games that right now, before DRM and everything really kicked in, we're only like 10 years into this technology, maybe 15 years, and we already have so many games lost in history. Imagine when this technology really starts to kick off. And I think there's going to be a lot of resistance to it. Despite people not liking physical media and people favoring digital media over physical media, I think there is eventually going to be a turning point where people say, hey, enough is enough. We want our freedom back. And I think that's going to happen once these services take off and people realize we're not really getting anything out of this. We're not really benefiting from this. Will it be too late, though? I don't know. But that's my take on Game Pass and the rise of these streaming services. Let me know what you guys think. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you guys, as always, for tuning in and supporting the channel, and I will see you guys later. Bye.